Good morning, everyone. We wanted to welcome you to our first live presentation of Reinstalling the Gallery. And I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Sarah Cartwright, Ulla R, Searing Curator of Collections, and Keith Crowley, our Senior Preparator. So Sarah and Keith, take it away. And here we go.
Okay, welcome everyone. We're live from Gallery 21 in our first ever live program from a Museum of Art gallery. And we're really happy you joined us today. We have a wonderful team of people here at the Ringling who've made this program possible, and we're very grateful to them as well. So I'm Sarah Cartwright. I'm the Ulla R. Searing Curator of Collections here, and I'm joined this morning by Keith Crowley, our Senior Preparator here at the Ringling. So today we're going to have a behind-the-scenes conversation about what goes into reinstalling a Museum of Art gallery. And we're going to be switching from live video to PowerPoint images. So just bear with us as we make that change. And we will have time for questions at the end. So I wanted to start today by just briefly explaining the role of curator and senior preparator. So I'll start with myself. So you probably know some of what a curator does. Obviously, I'm responsible for the collection of European art here at the museum, for researching it, for displaying it, choosing how the galleries will look, many other things. But all that work is done, of course, in collaboration with other departments here at the museum. And the one that curatorial works most closely with is collections. And that is the department in which Keith's team falls. So I'll let Keith talk about himself and about his role here at the museum.
Well, good morning, everyone. So the role of the preparator is specifically, I would say, is the department that deals with all the physical aspects of the collection. And that encompasses many, many things. Number one, it's the safety of the objects, but beyond that, the experience that the visitor has in the space. So that goes into design and the aesthetics, as well as the physical engineering. And mainly what my role is, and what and our entire department, which is all comprised of a group of people that has a similar skill set, is to manifest the vision that a curator has for the space. So we take into account each individual object, but we're also thinking about everything in context with one another, and how that fits with the mission of the museum.
That's right, and Keith has a lot of experience in other museums as well as here at the Ringling, and Keith is a painter himself, so his aesthetic judgment has been really valuable for me as we collaborate on a project like this. Another point I just wanted to note is how this differs from, say, a temporary exhibition, where we put together a suite of galleries that are going to be on view for only a few months. In this case, it's a permanent gallery expected to have some longevity, and so the decision-making process might be a little bit different, and we're thinking of long-term, many visitors, and maybe Keith, you want to jump in here, sort of talk about how you approach those things, if they're the same or differently in your mind.
Well, I will say that in particular, this is the type of project that excites me the most, because I know, unlike a 3-month exhibition or even a 1.5-year exhibition, this is going to have a lot of lasting impact on the museum. And being that we're moving in these stages, it's really wonderful to kind of take ownership of the things that began this museum, and to have them manifest in ways that multiple generations can experience, and multiple visitors from other cities when they come. In my mind, this is kind of like the primary aspect of this museum. It started here and it kind of continues to evolve.
Yeah, and I think as we think about reinstalling the Museum of Art galleries, we're thinking about the museum as a whole and the experience of moving through the Museum of Art as a whole and the collection as a whole. So it's not done in isolation the way temporary exhibitions tend to be done in a special exhibitions wing, where they don't necessarily have a continuity of the rest of the collection. So we're going to move to our PowerPoint now to share some images with you, to just talk briefly about the reinstallation project up to this point. So do we have the PowerPoint? Okay, so just very briefly to remind you, this Gallery 21 that we're standing in is part of a larger multi-year project to reinstall all 21 galleries in the Museum of Art. So we started this project under the previous curator of collections, who was Virginia Brilliant, who put together a plan for the 21 galleries together with Jeff Daly, who was an exhibition designer at the Metropolitan Museum for many years, is now an independent exhibition designer. And Jeff and Virginia's plan, as I said, consisted of reinterpreting the collections, showing them off to best effect, refreshing the galleries, and tightening the sort of theme of each gallery. So in the first slide, you see 2016, Virginia completed phase 1 of reinstallation. And then moving on to the next slide, you'll see that was the second phase, which by that point I had taken over the project, and we did galleries 16, 17, and 18. And then this, starting in 2019 and completed in 2020, if we move to the next slide, you'll see Gallery 21. So there is a goal to eventually complete all the Museum of Art galleries, bringing a fresh hang to our collection, and really just trying to make the visitor experience as good as it possibly can be. New lighting, new interpretation, and bringing the museum into the 21st century, really, in terms of its display. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. I want to talk a little bit about what was in Gallery 21 when we started this project last year. So I had been thinking about this gallery quite a bit, because the plan that Virginia put together for this gallery, for Gallery 21, I wanted to go in a little bit different direction. I wanted to focus more attention on the architectural sculpture in this gallery. I wanted it to really be something that was brought to the forefront. And so these ideas were in my mind. If you see in the slides, you can see what was in here. There were many great works in this gallery, but the overall theme of the gallery was somewhat lost, because they covered a wide range of time period and styles, including going well into the 20th century. And there were many small works on view in this gallery. And I felt that this large, impressive gallery really needed to benefit from large works. This is a chance to show large works of art. You know, I had a loose plan in my mind, but I thought that this would be one of the last galleries to be reinstalled. So Kyle, can you go on to the next slide? Have you reached the second one? Okay. And you can see the color was quite different. The amount of works in the gallery was much greater. It was a little bit harder to find one's way in that gallery, and I wanted to make it a much more cohesive statement. We'd been discussing this idea, Stephen and I, our director Stephen High and I, for a while, what I wanted to do with this gallery, and I'd been discussing it with Barbara Ramsey, our chief conservator, because one of the works I wanted very much to include in this gallery is the work that you see behind us, The Emperor Justinian by Jean-Joseph Benjamin Constant, a French painter of the 19th century, but the work was not in condition to display. It required a lot of work. And so the idea to reinstall this gallery was that, well, maybe one day we could get that work restored, but probably wouldn't happen anytime soon. And then Barbara Ramsey had the brilliant idea to apply for funding to the Getty Foundation's Conserving Canvas initiative, which supports structural conservation projects and supports the training of conservators in that area. So it would be a very big project if we got the funding, and Barbara put together an amazing application together with our grants administrator at the time. And we ended up getting that funding, and that meant that we had to fast track this gallery because we had to get the work on view once it was restored. So this is where we kind of talk about how we changed plans and how we switched gears to get Gallery 21 reinstalled. So I think we can switch back to our live video. And so receiving the Getty grant, as I mentioned, really changed everything. So I'll let Keith jump in here and talk about how we sort of operated from that point forward.
Yeah, so we usually try in our exhibition schedule and our workload schedule to plan about 2 years or more in advance to try to set a course for ourselves so we can put all the various things in place. So this past year, the plan was to actually do galleries on the north side of the museum, 9, 10, and 11. So that was the plan, and that's what we were kind of gearing up for. But then it was announced that we received this grant. And when that happened, kind of everything changed. It was a situation where we had an opportunity. Thankfully, our team is quite nimble, and at this point, we had some previous history of working through the other galleries. The only thing is this gallery in particular has some unique challenges, which we can definitely go into as we go throughout. But the biggest obstacle is the massive height of the ceiling. It's a 36-foot tall ceiling. And the lighting, because of that, was a challenge, not just because of the lift, but we have recessed track throughout the museum, and recessed track works in such a way that pieces of material are pushing up against that. But when you have a massive amount of heat building up there, it actually causes that to shrink. And the way these fixtures work is you take them out of the track and then try to plug them back in. Well, once you take them out, they don't go back in. So that presents enormous challenges when you're trying to light from that level. And as anyone knows in museum work, when you go through an exhibition, if you don't do lighting properly, the whole experience really, really suffers. So that was really the first challenge that we had to start to address is getting new track in there, which was a new thing to me. I'd never installed track before.
Yeah, so we'll talk a little bit more about that toward the end. But we recognized that there would be multiple challenges, and we started talking about these together, Keith and I, and with other members of his team. At that moment, very fortuitously, I had a curatorial research fellow arrive to work with me on reinstallation and other projects. His name's Kyle Mancuso, and he's with us today helping us with this project. But this was another challenge, was that there wasn't sufficient research on some of the architectural sculpture in this gallery. So we needed to verify information about the sculpted frieze, the door surround, the fireplace, and Kyle was able to step in very quickly and get some of that research done. And so that was just a huge help, and he's helped in other ways as well. Then another challenge was the painting itself, which is behind us, Emperor Justinian. Although we got the funding from the Getty to do the structural conservation work, the schedule for that meant that the painting would not be completed, its conservation would not be completed until January of 2020. We're in the summer of 2019, hoping to open the gallery in the fall of 2019. So that was just an additional challenge. How do we open a reinstalled gallery that doesn't have its crown jewel, that doesn't have its main focal work of art? And so we will talk a little bit about that as well. We decided to provide educational material for visitors and a vinyl on the wall that mimicked the size of the painting, which would be coming back on view. But as we sort of needed to mobilize this project and finalize a plan for it, finalize my scheme, the things I was keeping in mind were some of those things I just mentioned. The architectural sculpture, really wanting that to be at the forefront, wanting to have visitors notice it. Many visitors had never really noticed it or focused on it before, and I wanted that to change. As I said, I wanted the works on view to take advantage of the grand scale of the gallery, and thinking, as I said before, of the museum as a whole. This gallery has a special place. It is, for many people, either the first gallery they enter or more likely the last gallery as they are walking out of the building. But when you walk into the lobby, you look to the right and you see Rubens, Abraham, and Melchizedek through the glass door. If you look to the left, I wanted them to see something equally impressive and something that would draw them in this direction. And that is one of the reasons I really wanted Emperor Justinian on the wall here behind us, because I knew that it would I wanted this gallery to be a worthy counterpart to galleries 1 and 2, which house our enormous Rubens canvases. And it's hard to match Rubens, especially Rubens on that scale. But I wanted the scale of this gallery, which was clearly designed with a very grand vision, to be fully realized. So those were some of the thoughts that were in my mind as we were putting together, finalizing this plan. Do you have any other thoughts on this? Because otherwise we'll move to the slides that talk about how we did this.
I would like to just address the concept. So I thought it was interesting as we're working through this process, working with Sarah. I would say it's very fluid. We've had the experience of working in 16, 17, and 18, and now this. And I like the way Sarah thinks in that she has a very strong fine arts background, like in the applied aspects as well as the scholarly aspects. I'm obviously an applied type person, but we have these conversations that are very visually oriented, and it's really wonderful when you look at the floor plan that we'll show in one of the slides coming up. I mean, that was just her she mapped it out on grid paper, and throughout the whole process, it's been a series of conversations and a series of what we want a visitor to really experience once they're in this space. The color is something that I think is something that I would like to talk a lot about, and when you visit the museum, it's something I'd like you to think about, because color is one thing when you design an exhibition space. It is the least expensive way to really have a major impact on how the works feel in the space. And in this gallery, I would say that the color choice really sets off not just the works of art on the walls, but the built-in architectural features, the frieze, the fireplace, and the door surround just emerge from the wall, whereas previously, because of the value, the light and dark aspect of the color, they kind of sat down in the space and didn't emerge. And I'll find myself just making excuses to come walk through this space because I just enjoy the experience of being in here. But that is a lot of like conversations, and the color was originally chosen by Virginia, the previous curator, and Jeff Daly. But a previous designer and Sarah worked through a series of other color options, because it's good to kind of let the thing go full circle in that regard.
But I'll just say, when Virginia and Jeff picked this color, I was here when they did those tests, and I loved this color, even though the plan for the works that would be on view that they were thinking of was different. And so that was several years ago, a number of years ago. And when it came to actually do this space with this arrangement in mind, I still wanted to test colors. So I did that with our last designer, Joni Bradley. And we tested a range of colors in this general family, and nothing looked as good as this. So it was really a wonderful choice that Virginia and Jeff made, and that I fully supported keeping here. And I think it's turned out so beautifully, as Keith said. But definitely, these are the kinds of things that Keith and I talk about a lot, and that make, I think, it makes it fun to do this, because we kind of think alike, or we bounce ideas back and forth. But hopefully it makes for a beautiful experience in the gallery. I think it did in this case. At least I'm gonna go on record saying I like it.
Well, that's good.
So we're gonna move. Oh, actually, I've got some more slides. So let's go ahead and go back to PowerPoint. I did want to talk about one other aspect of the gallery. Almost forgot. Are we there? Okay, great. So just also the other consideration, this was important, and I almost forgot, because I thought we were leading into a different sequence of slides, the history of this space. So this gallery, Gallery 21, was envisioned as the museum's auditorium from the time the museum was designed by John Phillips, John Ringling's architect. So what you're seeing here is, am I right, this is a drawing by Phillips of Gallery 21, and you can see the stage set on the south wall where Emperor Justinian now hangs. The stage meant that if you look in the next photograph, that's a photograph of the stage. you can see the marble frieze, which runs along the top of the gallery, was interrupted on that wall in its original iteration. The stage is still there. It is behind the wall that Justinian now hangs on because the stage was walled up. But the space is still accessible and you can still see part of the stage back behind that wall. So this space had a history of being an auditorium, a place where talks were given and lectures were given. And then, importantly, this gallery was also the first location of the historic Oslo Theater at the Ringling. So when Chick Austin bought the theater, which he had been wanting to buy for a long time, it had been available for some time and he had his eye on it. When he bought it, he wanted to house it in its own building on the Ringling campus, but he couldn't get the support to do that, the financial support to do that. So the only alternative was to install it here in this gallery, which he did, and it opened in 1952. And it immediately began to be used for operas and plays and bringing in many kinds of musicians, lecturers, and became a really key element in the Ringling's commitment to 20th century theater as well as older works as well. And then years later, he was able to get the support to create a building for the historic Oslo Theater, which, as you know, was situated more or less where the Searing wing is now. That building was torn down some time ago. But this space thus has a theatrical history and an important tie to Ringling history. So I just thought that it could be a chance to focus on some aspect of Ringling history that was also really important, which is John Ringling's collecting of 19th century art. So by focusing on the architectural sculpture, letting those take center stage, these sculptures, of course, were salvaged by Mr. Ringling from the Huntington Mansion in New York City when it was demolished in 1926. He bought these architectural pieces, just as he had also done in the same year, actually same year, same month, April 1926, the Astor Mansion is also auctioned off. And he buys those two interiors, which are now our galleries 19 and 20 from the Astor Mansion. So I wanted to focus on his collecting of 19th century art. And I thought that it also would pay homage to sort of the original grand aspect of this gallery. So I think we're about ready to switch back to our live feed. Okay. So Keith chose this angle for the camera. So Keith, why don't you talk about what you wanted our visitors to notice in choosing this camera angle?
Well, several things. I think this gallery, aside from the Emperor Justinian painting, which is definitely the feature piece in this installation, you have kind of, I think, two interesting things going on. On the one side of the room, it is, I would say, it's like about animal locomotion. At least that's what it feels like to me, which is a very interesting thing to think about of what was happening at that period in history, especially American history. But then on this side is about, it feels much more about human sort of social, the social aspects of the world. And, you know, I've said, like, when I've been in here late at night, or late after hours, I should say, working on this space, I remembered having this kind of almost chilling sense of this kind of like echoes of times past, you know? And this fireplace is just a magnificent thing. And as you're going through the process of lighting it, it feels to me like when you're lighting something, it's almost like making a still life drawing. Things start to really reveal themselves to you because you can see them. Mm-hmm. But it also is casting them, it's bringing them to life.
Absolutely.
And it's great to have that opportunity to be kind of like in the driver's seat on that. So I think this is a great, I mean, I love this room in all its various aspects, but I think this is a really dramatic component of this room.
Yes, and when we chose this camera angle, Keith said it showed off how wildly extravagant this gallery is. And I think that's true. And this fireplace, as he mentioned, I hope you take time to really look at it carefully, because the way Keith has lit these sculptures, particularly the two female sculptures on either side, they just, the light plays across the surfaces in a way that looks like they're dancing. I mean, they kind of have a dancing aspect, and the play of light on their faces, their expressions, it's just, I think I'm so glad that these sculptures are finally singing and dancing for us. And so are the putti up on the frieze, which now have light and they can be seen and they can be appreciated. So let me just make sure we haven't forgotten anything else we wanted. I think we want to move to our slide presentation, because now we've kind of given you the background of many of our thoughts and choices. And now we're just going to look at some slides to kind of give you a sense of how it actually works, how we kind of move into this work and move through this kind of work. So are we back to PowerPoint? Okay. So this first slide you're seeing, so this is the drawing that Keith mentioned that I put together. So this was, oh boy, we have the money from the Getty. I need to decide on what we're doing. I think you can see the date, it was August 2019. So this was my attempt to really just get it down on paper. And remarkably, what I have here actually turned out to be pretty final. We changed the order of the two sculptures around the fireplace, but it represented a dramatic reduction in the number of works on view. And that was, this is something Keith and I talked about a lot. The decision to eliminate certain works that were in this gallery was not easy. You had some wonderful masterpieces, notably the Robert Henry Salome painting, which is one of my favorites, one of Keith's favorites, I know, and one of the great works in the collection was in here. It doesn't fit now with the current theme, so I decided to eliminate it, but I'm not thrilled with that. I mean, I'm thrilled that it's not here in the sense that it didn't fit, but I miss that painting, and I hope that we will have a chance to display it in another way. But other things that we moved out were works by Bierstadt, for example, small landscapes, and those I hope to be able to display in Gallery 20. When we get to that reinstallation, I intend to put some small paintings of the 19th century on view in that space, which lends itself much more to small, intimate paintings, whereas a huge gallery like this really does not lend itself to the careful, close observation of small paintings. Do you have some thoughts on this, Keith?
No, I think that's a great example of, just like when you're writing or producing a work of art or doing anything, you always have to keep the whole in mind versus the sum of parts. And oftentimes that includes eliminating one of your favorite sentences or expressions if it's not working. And so in this case, a Henry, which, if I had to pick a top 5, that's probably like way up there as, one of my favorite pieces in the whole collection, but it didn't work with the concept of the gallery space. It was a bit of an outlier, and those are difficult decisions to make, and sometimes you have to do that. And
so go ahead on to the next slide. Right.
So this is just part of I'm going to confess right now I have zero, I'm developing a technical drawing ability in terms of digital, and I don't have that yet, so I have to do these things physically with pencil. So we select pedestal designs based on what's appropriate. The whole idea with exhibition supports is you want them to be right. You don't want them to draw attention to themselves. We were talking earlier that the anecdote I always use about preparator and even exhibition design is it's like being a good umpire. A good umpire is there at a baseball game to call the game, to officiate. You don't go to the game to watch the umpire. It's unfortunate when the umpire makes mistakes, because that's when you start noticing them. Mm-hmm. So when we're making these decisions, one of the thing we have the advantage of is all of these things are in hand. We have these things that we can actually bring to the gallery space, put them on a lift, and judge what height things need to be and figure out the proportions and all of that. And that's kind of how we come to the conclusion about this stuff. Here we go with getting up on the lift and driving around and installing lighting tracks.
So just so people know, so this is clearly the work being done on the lighting before the gallery is repainted, before the floors are redone. before we rehang. So this was sort
So
of.
this is infrastructure.
Mhm.
This is actually putting, you know, a lighting track, installing it in the ceiling, making sure it's not going to come crashing down. We have this huge rental lift, and I thought this was a good photograph to show, like, you know, what you do. And it's, again, there's nothing, I mean, I did a little bit of research, but a lot of it you just have to sort of figure out a strategy that works for your space. So you can see there's, you know, it's a tall ceiling, and we also had to mount these boards over top of the old track. So if you can see at the top of that, that was one of the problems we had to solve, is mounting a surface that the new track could be attached to and then wired. So it's boring stuff, but it's just helpful to know, like, there's a lot more that goes into these kind of projects than just like hanging paintings on a wall.
And another thing was the architectural sculpture itself. The frieze hadn't really been photographed. Each panel we didn't have good photography. It needed dusting. We had conservation, of course, needed to come into the project in that regard as well, to make sure that we could get the works dusted and looking as good as they could.
So as you can see here, this is a very sound way of making sure a painting is installed properly. Instead of having, you know, a strongman competition of hefting this thing up onto the wall, we use tools, you know, and it just crank lift, and the people on the walls balance. We always use hardware that's excessively stronger than the work of art. You know, these paintings are a couple 100 pounds. We make sure that each one of these hooks can handle double what we actually put on the wall. So it's a very, you know, we don't want the visitor to think about how things get up on the wall, but this is how it happens. It's a balanced, coordinated effort.
And then I'm the one taking this picture, you know, trying to determine how high and low we want things. And so it really is a joint effort, you know, all of us in there together to get it done. Okay, go ahead.
Right. Same kind of thing. You know, these pedestals, again, they're not just hollow pedestal, they're loaded up with weight, so they're ballasted, so if they were ever to be bumped into, the object on the top would stay put. This elephant, which is a wonderful, wonderful piece, it's exquisitely crafted, and even a very dynamic composition. Used to live in the fireplace, so it's finally getting its due. And you know, again, sound efforts, we try to slide everything into position and use tools instead of, again, hefting things into position. Again, this, well, I'll let you talk about the St. Gaudens, which is, I think,
yeah. So this is a bust by Augustus St. Gaudens, one of 3 works by him in the collection. Yeah, so this was a case where we ended up changing from my initial plan. I had thought that this bust would go to the other side of the fireplace, and that the bust by Villa of the woman would be on this side. But clearly, once we got in here, we realized right away that it was much better to do what we ended up doing, putting the female bust near the portrait of Sarah Bernhardt, the Stevens painting. But yeah, again, the only challenge here maybe was the height, making sure that our pedestal was going to be at the right height. And I think Keith and I came in here, you know, prior to his pedestal design, to talk about how that bust, what height it needed to be to have the right relationship to the architectural sculpture and to the paintings around it.
And I would say even further, so when you're dealing with a work of art too, you think about the gaze that is placed, you know, fused into what the sculptor wanted. And previously, this was at more of like a table height, like 40 inches or so. And when you engaged him, he's staring at your navel instead of like in your face. So now he's positioned in such a way that he almost looks like he's attentively ready to say something to you.
Yes.
Which I think is a different psychological experience, and that's a really important experience to convey in a gallery setting.
Well, and with sculpture, you really have to be attentive to height, and I'm kind of super attentive to that, because I think it's often generally displayed too low. And sculptors, when they make work, are very, very conscious of what angle, the angle from which it would be seen. And that goes back to antiquity. So it's, you know, you kind of have to, obviously there's a balance. We're in a museum, we're not in its original setting in many cases, but you kind of have to think about the perspective of the viewer and the perspective from which the work was clearly meant to be seen. Okay.
Capstone. So this piece I thought was a great way to sort of echo what is happening in the Emperor Justinian painting. Oh, I should let Sarah, you're better at talking about it.
No, I was glad you started talking about it. This is one of 4 bronze Victorynikkei that John Ringling collected of that same design. We have one out in the front of the museum, 2 medium-sized ones, and 1 very small one that's on John's desk in Kazan. And this same statue is painted by Benjamin Constant in the Emperor Justinian painting. So we wanted to have our actual sculpture as a complement to the painting. But this had some challenges because this sculpture is on a pin, on a post. I'm probably not using the right word. What would you say?
So the pin is actually welded into the foot because it was obviously designed to sort of sleeve into something in its original setup, some kind of a mount or whatever. But when we installed it to sort of round out the exhibition, the observation was made by our curator that it was too low. So, you know, you go back to the drawing board because and we agreed, it was like, it felt sort of strange having that foot set right at the base of that pedestal. So again, you know, flexibility and problem solving comes into effect, and we actually had one of our great local crafts people who was also an installer, Zach Gilliland, welded us a new mount that we could mount on that, and it's really makes a huge difference the way it kind of soars off the pedestal.
This is really important. It had been displayed here previously in a gallery with the foot just on a flat surface, and that was many years ago. We have old photos of that. But this sculpture is supposed to be flying. Her garment is billowing out behind her, and she's barely touching down with 1 foot. So you can't, I mean, it has to look like she's just dropping in, and that's exactly what Prep made happen with this. And I'm you know, it's that kind of thing that really makes a difference, I think, in not only to me personally, but in the way the gallery is perceived and enjoyed. Okay, so here I just want to, I mentioned this before, that Emperor Justinian, the painting, wouldn't be ready for the reopening of the gallery. And we reopened this gallery in November 2019. And I talked to Stephen High, our executive director, about this, and it was actually Stephen's input to have a small vinyl version of the full-size painting, but the vinyl was much, much smaller, and then use a white or off-white colored outline to indicate the actual size of the painting. And so what you see here are the vinyl installers putting that vinyl on the wall. And then we added, if you recall, an iPad kiosk and a video about the project to restore Emperor Justinian. And again, many people here worked on that video. It took marketing, it took curatorial, took conservation, which described the work that was happening on Emperor Justinian and the support from the Getty. And we put that in the center of the gallery. So we were letting people know that this work would be coming. And then once it came back, we also launched into getting a frame for the painting. And that was also a process that's taken us through most of 2020. So the painting came back and went on the wall in January. And it was right after that that I contacted a local woodworker, Dale Reiki, to see if he would be interested in working on the frame. Dale worked with us on the tea house, and he was very interested. And due to the interruption of COVID, it took a little longer than we had planned, but the frame is now here and on the painting, and we're so thrilled to have it, thanks to one of our board members who donated funds for this frame. So I'm just thrilled with the way it turned out, and that the painting is back to life and framed and perfect in our gallery.
Yeah, it's really amazing how well the frame sets the work off now. I wasn't even expecting it to be such a big kind of finish. Or, just it's really appropriate for the work, I think.
Is that our last slide? Oh, right.
Yeah, so this is just the final, you know, tweaking of lighting. It's just like, again, it was actually quite a big pleasure to make this gallery, be sensitive to the needs of this gallery, including the freeze and playing around even with different color temperatures to sort of indicate that daylight is a part of that upper portion of the galleries, and using appropriate color temperature, you know, different color temperatures for the freeze is, you know, it's cooler light up there, and then warmer light on the paintings to sort of make them feel a little more human.
Right, so Keith is talking about this lighting as though it were just like a small thing, but this is actually the result of a lot of work, and of course his expertise in lights and what they do and the color temperatures he's talking about. There's a lot to know, and usually you do that work alone, am I right?
Mostly, I mean, other members of the staff, but it's not always easy to convey that, especially in our busy schedule. We have to divide and conquer a lot in the galleries, and there's multiple projects going on at once. So you know, for these permanent gallery installations, yeah. But Ellie Bloom helps us with lighting in the exhibitions, but she, you know, her demands have increased on her in registration. So oftentimes it's myself or you know, it takes a long time to learn that sort of stuff.
I can imagine, but for us it's like magic, because you know the gallery isn't really lit until someone with that expertise lights it, and then you know they do that, and then you know I get the word, okay, I want you to see what I've done, and I go in, and it's like, you know, it's just incredible what these lights can do, but also with human expertise manipulating them. I mean, it's really just, it's fantastic what you're able to achieve with lighting.
Well, thanks.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, so I think we're at the end of the slide presentation. So we are going to come back live, and we are happy to answer questions. And I think we're done with our portion. So thank you all for listening today.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to speak up. You may have to unmute yourself.
I have a comment I'd like to make. First off, thank you for your expertise and the articulate nature in which you've made this presentation. But with us today, participating from Chicago, are Megan Mark Hausberg, and Megan Mark funded that framing of the Emperor Justinian. So I want to thank them for that.
A certain amount of the time.
Was there ever a painting intended for above the fireplace in that space?
I'm going to relay the questions. You mean in the middle of the fireplace there?
Yeah.
Okay. So the question is, was there a painting or something intended for that space in the fireplace, in the recess of the fireplace?
As Kyle helped determine, it was a mirror in that space originally, not a painting. But I assume that, I don't know if this marble was there behind the mirror originally or if that was added. We know that the marble panels up top above the fireplace were not part of the original arrangement. So those must have been added, we assume, by John Ringling. And so it's possible that he added marble in that area in the center where the mirror had been at the same time. Good question.
Thank you. The whole thing is a revelation. Congratulations. Beautiful.
So what what's next, Sarah? What gallery will be your next project?
So the question is, what gallery is next, or what is the next project?
So the plan is that this summer we did not embark on a reinstallation project due to the virus and things being on hold. But the plan is that next summer we will do galleries 9, 10, 11, which were slated for 2019. And those will become a gallery of Spanish paintings, a gallery of Rubens and his followers. So the smaller scale works, I say smaller scale, there's some of them still quite large, like the Lot and his daughters and the Pausias and Glacera, Rubens and his followers, and then a gallery devoted to Baroque portraiture, which would be gallery 11. So that is still our plan, to move forward with that. And luckily we've done quite a bit of work on that, because that's what we thought we were going to do instead of 21. But so we're a little ahead of the game, which is
Don't
nice.
jinx it.
Over to Keith.
It used to be the Rosa Bonheur with the cattle. That when I first visited the museum, that painting just knocked my socks off. I haven't seen the one in Paris in person, but this was amazing. But over time, I would say its counterpart on the opposite of the deer, that painting is magical in terms of how she uses the palette and her sensitivity. I mean, she is really, really a color master, and not just the anatomy of the deer, but actually the sort of psychology that the deer have. They feel so, they feel so vital, and yeah, that painting is my favorite.
Does it have to be a painting? So I'm really fond of the sculpture in here. I mean, I love the works of art on view, don't get me wrong, but the more that we've looked at these sculptures, particularly the marble frieze, which Kyle, as I mentioned, has done a lot of additional research into, which is wonderful, but just from a perspective of carving, of technique, of virtuosic facility with I mean, for someone in the late 19th century, it's really, these are really treasures. This is really fine, really fine work. And I'm so glad that it's now getting some more attention, because these are they're just spectacular. And I never tire of, I love sculpture, and I never tire of looking at those. So that's my answer today. Any other questions?
I think that's it.
Okay, so I guess we have no more questions. I want to thank you all for joining us today and for your support of the Ringling, and thank everyone who was involved in this program, putting it together, Sharon Fredis, above all, Isabel, and all the rest of our team who've brought this program to you. And I hope it's the first of many, not just for me to bring information to you, but for many facets of our museum to be able to speak live from the galleries in the future.
Yeah,
thanks very much. This was a great presentation.
Sort of thing, and I hope it was meaningful to you.
Yeah, certainly was.
Thank you.